Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Welcome to Between the Lines. Today, our theme is what the last thing you think of before you die. I am so happy to have Dr. Michael Kannisto with me, who will share with you a very interesting project to me that, and hopefully will be a fine prompt for you all today as we respond to our shook artist. Hope that you are all well and glad to see each one of you here. So, without further ado, I'm going to give the stage to Michael Kannisto, who's a um, entrepreneur, a chemist, you name it. He's done interesting things. He gave us a very short bio, but his bio actually, his curriculum vitae actually extends pages. But today he comes to us as an artist and as someone who's contemplating life and death. Michael Canisto, please take the stage.
Thank you. I think this will be a bit of a departure for everyone. I hope that's okay, but I'm looking forward to sharing this with you, and I'm excited about the prompt as well. So let me go ahead and get through the most challenging part, which is seeing if I can share my screen with you. And please tell me if you can see a white screen. Awesome. All right. Again, this will be a bit of a departure, and I hope that's okay. I'm, in this context, a amateur fashion designer, dressmaker, and I discovered this passion relatively late in life, and it's brought me some interesting surprises. But the one that was most surprising to me is the way that death has somehow, again and again, found its way into my work, which is what I'm going to talk about today. I want to talk about this Death Shroud project, which is what initially got me invited to this group. And I will talk about that, but it'll probably be helpful for me to give a little context first. When I first became interested in fashion, I wanted to focus on an area. I always liked vintage clothing, but that's kind of a large category. So I tried to narrow my focus a bit. In Japan in the 1920s, there was a movement that very closely paralleled the Roaring Twenties flapper aesthetic that was taking place in the West. And I found that I was very interested in it. I liked the colors and the textures and the construction of the women's wear. I'll show a few photos as I go along. This is how I started, by studying these very unusual clothes and trying to learn more about them and eventually reproducing them. The funny thing was, this is kind of a short-lived fashion era reserved for upper class or wealthy women. So there aren't a lot of pictures. So when I became interested in this Japanese moga or modern girl era, I made a rule for myself: no kimonos. I was already feeling like I was at the very borders of cultural appropriation. And I was particularly aware at the time of recent concerns about the fetishization of people of Asian descent. Some of you may remember Gwen Stefani and her Harajuku girls, who were her sort of people who followed her around, or her backing vocal. They were instructed to only speak Japanese when they were on camera. It was very uncomfortable for many people. And also Katy Perry's performance of Unconditionally while wearing a Japanese kimono at the 2013 American Music Awards. I just wanted to learn how to explore the use of simple bodice and skirts, and no kimonos for me. But as I researched and tried to learn more, I found that for every photo, like the one on the left, there are many more that look like the one on the right. And I eventually realized that there would never have been a moga, or Japanese modern girl movement or era, if not for the kimono. In fact, this national outfit has been a very powerful force in fashion. And as an example of that, I'll share with you the 1930s fad that swept the resorts and beaches of wealthy people: beach pajamas. On the right are beach pajamas, which are sort of things that wealthy women would wear to beaches. They're actually trouser legs. Those are just big trousers. They're not skirts. And everyone was wearing them. I can't help but see the influence of the kimono in this silhouette. If you look at the one on the right, the beach pajamas, I'm not trying to convince you, but when I look at the picture on the left, I kind of see some origins there. And we do know that the Art Deco patterns that were found in the beach pajamas in the West, this was the 30s after all, made their way back to textile designers in Japan and were soon seen on the kimonos of the era. It appeared there was no escaping the kimono. The best way to understand a garment is to take it apart. And so I succumbed and ordered a vintage kimono from eBay. I took it over to the cutting table and began to unfold it when something very unexpected happened. There are a lot of kimonos in the world. Japan has the highest proportion of elderly citizens of any country in the world. And that means that every single day, lots of grandmas pass away, leaving behind their kimonos, like these vintage examples on the left. And it wouldn't be unusual for that number to be 50 or even 100 of them if she had a wedding trousseau. People don't want to throw them away. And so an industry of resellers has popped up, and it's kind of a national concern at the moment. I realize now that when that first kimono arrived, it had in all likelihood been carefully folded, as you see on the right, and stored in paper in a purpose-built kimono dresser for decades. They are handmade works of art, and so they are laundered infrequently. There is a lining that protects the silk that you see on the outside. When I began to unfold the garment, it suddenly felt as though someone was in the room with me. I looked and I saw sweat stains in the armpits of the lining, and the odd sensation of seeing part of the kimono that I was not ever supposed to see was heightened by the faintest bloom of scent molecules of what? Sandalwood incense, certainly from a household altar, and old cooking oil and scented face powder, and a touch of perfume, very floral. Hyacinth and carnations were popular fragrance notes in Japan back in those days, and perspiration and 100 other things. I realized that the person who wore this kimono and folded it up carefully one day and put it away all those years ago was no longer on this earth. And that was how death first visited my little fashion hobby. The second time was during a class I took with the magnificent Joanne Ebenstein, who runs the Museum of Morbid Anatomy here in Brooklyn. She teaches a class regularly where she talks about these amazing wax figures, these wax anatomical models that were crafted in Italy in the 1780s to teach the general public about anatomy. They are dissectable, and they are made with human hair, and they are at once beautiful and clinical. The only word for them is uncanny, a word explored by Freud himself in 1919. Strange or unusual in a way that is difficult to understand, not simply mysterious, but creepy, often in a strangely familiar way. As you can see, these women are naked, but recline on silk pillows. They wear pearls or tiaras. One of them holds a ribbon of silk delicately between her two fingers. Everyone was asked to submit a final product, and I decided to put a dress on this particular anatomical Venus. I felt like the artist had deliberately made his model naked, but with jewels and posed in throes of ecstasy as a way of placing them right in the middle space between clinical and erotic. I am not a historical costumer, but I was able to learn what an upper-class Italian girl would have worn in the late 18th century. Here are some examples. This is actually the fabric I used. These are the color schemes, generally floral patterns. And at the time, there was a contrasting petticoat or opera gown. Sometimes you've seen these stomachers. There's sort of that was sort of what would be very common for someone in the era. So here's the dress I made. And I found someone with superior Photoshop skills and asked him to dress this anatomical Venus with my dress. And this is what happened. It's different to me. I think the dress changed her, even in death. And so that was a little bit of background. That was the second time death worked its way into my innocent hobby. And I wanted to provide that context for you. So thank you. Almost a year ago, I attended a series of workshops with Tamara Retino, who is an acupuncturist and an end-of-life doula. We talked about historic end-of-life rituals and shrouds in particular. Everyone was encouraged to create a death shroud. And here's how I designed mine. I thought about a few things that were on my mind as I thought about what I wanted my death shroud to look like. Um, on the right, many of you may remember or are familiar with the Voyager Gold record, which was launched, was attached to two separate versions of the Voyager spacecraft in 1977. It's a, I guess what we'd call it a video disc, and it has pictures from planet Earth. It has different examples of music. It has greetings in many different languages, and it was attached to the spacecraft and sent out into deep space past the reaches of our own galaxy in the hopes that someone in the future would read it and find it and learn about us. I was very taken with this idea of creating a garment or a ritual that allowed people to learn about the person who wore the death shroud even long after they're gone. On the left, I wish I could talk about this for longer. It's just fascinating for me. In the late 70s and early 80s, as we began to rely more as a civilization on nuclear power, the question came up about, well, you know, when you generate nuclear power, there is nuclear waste, and it's pretty dangerous. So, you know, the safest thing for us to do is we bury it and it's fine. Well, people began to realize, well, what's going to happen? This stuff lasts for 250,000 years. How are we going to ensure that our descendants or ancestors, or I'm sorry, descendants or people who come after us are not going to dig this up and bring harm to themselves? And so they started to sponsor these competitions where people would design ways of communicating to future generations to not dig somewhere. If you think about it, if you put a sign that says don't dig here, what's the first thing you want to do? You want to dig there and find out what's there. And so it was very interesting. And again, this theme of communicating clearly with people in the future was very intriguing to me. A lot of the work was how do you communicate, you know, imagery and pictograms. Some of it was hostile architecture. The one thing that came out of this particular study was there was a list of things that we would definitely want to be included in any way of communication. These are things that you would really want to be able to communicate no matter, you know, how you solve the problem. And so that was really intriguing to me. I also wanted it to be gorgeous. And if you're familiar with Balenciaga, he's one of my favorite designers. And I know for a fact that as I started to think about my shroud project, that the garment on the left, which is the famous amongst fashion folks, the famous seamless wedding dress, Balenciaga's famous seamless wedding dress of 1967, was definitely very sumptuous and regal. And I had that on my mind as I was thinking about how to design my shroud. This is my first design sketch, which I saved. And I'll just talk you through kind of what ended up being in the final version of what I wanted to do with my death shroud. As you can see, it's flax linen. Flax linen was what I was able to determine was what the mummies were wrapped in, the Egyptian mummies. So I thought that was kind of a cool idea, sort of a kind of a clap back, if you will, to the original people who were great at preserving folks for the future. As you can see, there's a hood, and the sleeves are longer than the arms. And these little things here are where the feet end. I really wanted to be able to cover up the fingers, the toes, the ears. When someone passes away, those start to look not so nice pretty quickly. And I really wanted people to feel like this was an approachable, I wanted them to be able to say farewell to their beloved without having to be, you know, the kids would be creeped out, or you wouldn't want to see people that you cared about begin to show signs of that you didn't want to see. So I decided to make everything covered except the face, which is not uncommon in other versions of farewell rituals. I really wanted to be sumptuous and regal. I wanted to be one material. It's all flax linen with the exception of the thread, which is also a natural material, which is silk. And this is sort of what I decided to use as my inspiration. Oh, I'm sorry. There's one other thing you might not be able to see here, which is this little pocket. There's actually this strap which I'll talk about later, is actually contained in this pocket. So if you were to receive this garment, everything that you would need to conduct the ritual is contained in one package. I'll also talk about this little feature here, which I really like. So that closes with these ties. And then this is a pouch, in a sense. I'll show you a picture later, and it's a pouch that is basically strapped to the deceased's chest. And I'll talk about how the ritual works here in a little bit, but that's what that is. I really like the idea of a garment, an entirely bespoke garment made for one person to wear one time only. And so even the experience of creating my own pattern, this is my death shroud pattern based on my measurements. You can see my little calculations here on the left. This is the hood. It's got a nice dart in it, so it fits nicely. Getting two-dimensional objects to sit on a three-dimensional person is the classic challenge for fashion designers. And this is what it ended up looking like. It's not a great picture because it's over 8 feet long. Remember, my feet are only going to go to about here so that no one has to look at my feet, my toes, and all the things that are happening there. And as you can see a little bit better picture of the pouch here, there are straps there are 4 straps attached to the garment on the left, 4 straps attached to the garment on the right, and then 4 and 4 each side of the pouch, which correspond to an opposite tie. They're diagonally oriented, so it kind of looks pretty. I originally had 6, and a friend of mine who was Chinese said, "Oh, make it 8. Make it 8. 8 is a much more lucky number or better number for this garment," and that's what I did. So I talk a little bit more about this. So the idea would be that as the people who were close to the departed begin to gather around and say goodbye, that one by one, each person would be able to put a memento, a photograph, a note, a card, a toy, a gift, something that had meaning to them. And one at a time, each person would gather around the deceased and take this, add something again to this little pouch. It's just a pouch made of the same material. And as they said their farewells, they would put an item into the pouch. Once that's done, one by one, each person would in turn tie one of these straps. Again, it would take a while because there's 8 of them and you have to get the bow and you have to coordinate them together. It would intentionally sort of slow the process down and allow the goodbye to take place. Also, you would take then the strap that was provided along with the garment and sort of gather the bottom together and fold it underneath the remains and then tie that strap around them to secure the feet. And then you would finish putting your items into the pouch. And then these are, by the way, there's no sleeve openings here. You would then, the final thing would be to tie the sleeves together, basically putting the hands, tying the hands in a position over the pouch. My thought was that anyone who came across the remains in the future, whether there was still any remains left, whether the garment was left, whether it was just bones, whether it was just a hollow, in my mind, the communication was such that if someone encountered remains where the person was put to rest, clutching to their chest items that then are found alongside the remains, that would signal to future generations, well, whatever these items are, even if we can't read them, they were probably really important to this person. And that sort of, for me, connected this idea of being able to communicate with folks from the future. And so the combination of a functional garment with the ritual, in my mind, made the process of saying farewell as comfortable as possible, but also allowed for a safe and inviting way to say goodbye to the person that you want to say goodbye to. If I had, that's really where it is. Happy to talk about it, but I thought a few things. I thought about what insights I could offer to this group. You probably don't have many fashion designers here, and I appreciate your patience with me. And I guess if I had any insights to offer to the group, it would be to remember that you don't know where your work will be read, or when your work will be read, or by whom. My favorite poet is Thomas Hardy, and he was writing poems just 100 years ago. in English, yet I still have to look up words and phrases that were commonplace in his time, but mysterious to me. Writing is a gift for people you will never know. And I thought I would recite something to you to conclude this part of the meeting. And I'll ask if you remember when I mentioned that study about how to warn for future generations about the danger of buried radioactive waste. And I mentioned there was this recommendation from the committee about what specific messages any successful solution would convey. Well, the recommendation sounds like a poem to me, so I'm going to read it to you. This place is a message and part of a system of messages. Pay attention to it. Sending this message was important to us. We considered ourselves to be a powerful culture. This place is not a place of honor. No highly esteemed deed is commemorated here. Nothing valued is here. What is here was dangerous and repulsive to us. This message is a warning about danger. The danger is in a particular location. It increases towards a center. The center of danger is here, of a particular size and shape, and below us. The danger is still present in your time, as it was in ours. The danger is to the body, and it can kill. The form of danger is an emanation of energy. The danger is unleashed only if you substantially disturb this place physically. This place is best shunned and left uninhabited. Thank you.
Everyone, unmute and please share your immediate responses to Michael Kannisto. Thank you so much for bringing your presentation to us. Any first insights, everyone?
I have to say, I've never given that much close attention to design my own shroud. I mean, that is taking it one level above. In fact, I think actually one of the poems I wrote is a bit, maybe be a little bit controversial because it's a little bit more kind of death, fuck it, it's kind of response to it. But no, it was interesting, all those little, the little kind of features and the amount of thought and detail that you put into it, particularly about I was wondering what are you going to say about the little thing on the chest, and then you said, oh, having to tie the things, and that idea of giving the person time to say goodbye. That was quite intriguing. I thought it was unusual because very often, sometimes I remember I went to a funeral in beginning of January this year, my aunt's, and they had this cardboard made coffin, and her grandson, one of the grandsons, had painted a design on the lid. And as we were leaving after all of all of the speakers and things and the prayers, we walked past and looked and touched the coffin as a sort of saying goodbye. But I wondered what it would have been like if it had been more involved with that thing, that design that you incorporated. But fascinating.
Thank you, Ian. Any other first impressions that you would like to share with Michael? Ravi.
I was strangely reminded of Wallace Stevens's this Sunday morning, especially this particular line, still for the passing of her dreaming feet over the seas. The shroud covering the feet especially seemed very apt and some kind of a tribute to the dignity of the dead. And there is so much of culture that you bring to this essential dressage of the corpse of the dead. it makes it all so much more meaningful, so much more intimate. Thank you. I had never known the shroud to have such immense meaning attached to it.
Joanna Ebenstein, who I mentioned earlier, runs the Museum of Morbid Anatomy, has a nice TED Talk that's available. And in it, she says, I'm paraphrasing her now, in the West, we have a strange relationship with death. We sort of outsource it to funeral industry. And she said something I hope I get the quote as close as possible. She said, if everyone who has ever lived is dead, and barring a medical miracle, everyone in this room will eventually be dead. Why is it considered so unusual or morbid, in a sense, to talk about something that is a shared experience universally for everyone who's ever lived? And I feel in many ways there are many other cultures who have a much more healthy approach to saying farewell to people.
I like the fact that you tied the individual death to the problem of radioactive waste, something also that we seem capable of ignoring despite its long-term impact.
There's some really brilliant work that occurred there. I don't know whatever actually became of any of it. I mean, there were some really brilliant solutions to, again, it's sort of like that legal term, an attractive nuisance, meaning if you build something elaborate, there's going to be a natural curiosity to go poking around and find out what's there. And so there were some very interesting solutions. One, I shouldn't even say it because I didn't bother, I had to sort of move on, but there was this one person who proposed the idea of like, what is one universal thing about people? They love cats. So what if we bred a variety of cat that changed color when they were exposed to nuclear, to radiation? I mean, people were coming up with really brilliant ideas. But yeah, I mean, the whole challenge is how do you communicate with people who will be very different to us 10,000 years from now, for example. It's kind of fun. It's fun to think about.
I also like your use of the communication that was sent out on Voyager. I had an interesting experience of, I produced a slideshow that went along with a symphony of space music. And I was accused later of putting obscenity up because of the little picture of a naked man and woman, which, if you recall the detail, is only a simple line for all the naughty bits, if you will.
Yeah, I remember Carl Sagan was, heavily involved at the time, and he intentionally said, well, if you look really carefully, it's actually not anatomically correct. We left one little piece out, which you're referring to, and people still lost their minds over that. It was weird. I feel, yeah, strange, right?
Thank you.
I think Jennifer was trying to say something for a little bit.
Thank you. There are 3 points that I wanted to make. I felt that it was interesting that it was sort of like based on a wedding gown. It's from the wedding gown and then it goes on to the shroud. And the other thing is like, okay, so it's a new life to me. A wedding gown signifies a new life. And to me as well, the shroud can also signify a new life after death, if you will. The other thing is also that the pouch is close to the chest of the dead person. So that, of course, has a lot of significance. And the third thing is when you mentioned that it's very difficult to do something, to sew something or to cover up a 3D person with something that you do on a paper pattern with 2D. So I've dabbled in a little bit of dressmaking before, and it's really very difficult. But at the same time, I can see that it takes on a new dimension as well. So it's like 2D, 2 dimensions, 3 dimension. And then at the end of the day, when everything kind of like collapses and we turn to dust and all that, the person who is dead actually becomes kind of like 2D-ish as well. But he actually has moved on to a new dimension. Yeah. So that's all.
I really like that. Wow. I really like that.
I pretty much lost my shit when you put your garment over the the mannequin thing, that was so cool. At that point, I was like, damn. My observations are that you were focusing on the transition to the afterlife. A lot of cultures do that believe in reincarnation and afterlife. Some of them are more badass than the others, like the Vikings. But particularly, I thought that was a stark contrast with the Western mindset to hold on to the deceased, to breathe. And you look at the funerals, it's depressing, it's a sense of loss. And what you did instead was an anticipation of what's to come, a celebration of what your uh, debut into the next realm could be like. It's a bit like a coming of age of quinceaneras and 21st birthdays, and I thought it injected a elegant uh, perspective, an otherwise macabre perspective, at least with the Western mindset. So I thought all that was very, very positive.
It's funny, as part of this, I explored my own beliefs in the afterlife. I'm Finnish. Finland is my ancestral home, and I didn't know anything about afterlife beliefs for people in Finland. So this gave me an opportunity to dig into those. And I always tell people what I learned is the story. Of course, there's a river, right? There's always a river in most afterlife, after death legends. And anyway, you cross over and someone gives you a glass of beer and you drink it and you forget your prior life and you're able to move on. And I thought, that sounds just like my Uncle Walter, who takes a drink and forgets everything, forgets about his current life. So in keeping with my Finnish heritage. So it was funny. The interesting thing about Finns is they also would bury people with socks on, because you had to make the journey yourself. You had to make the journey north. I'm going like this because it was north, because north was a mysterious place that no one went back when these stories were developed. And you'd go north and they'd give you extra socks so that you'd be warm as you made your way to the afterlife.
Well, Michael, that was a treat, and something so profound surprised me. The history that you led up to your final garment, and
Yeah, I'm just reading the comments. Thank you. I was. Oh, look at this. Thank you for everyone for engaging on the comment board. This is fun for me.
we'll
And Jennifer has
send
a new haircut.
a transcript of the comments so that you can reflect on that. And thank you everyone for engaging, Michael. What kept coming back to mind was the movie Departures. It's a Japanese movie about a person who prepares bodies uh, when they die, and how he relates, how he learns to relate to the death ritual and contemplates himself and meaning, and also contemplates the those who love the deceased. And so I would challenge each one of you to watch that movie. It's something that will be on my final bibliography of things that I would love those who cared about me to watch. So thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for sharing something so intimate and something so precious in your life, uh, and bringing your gifts as a designer, an innovator, um, and a philosopher to our community. So, as a transition, as well as a space for reflecting on our work, Lucian and I are going to share our piece called Pain or Ascension. And please feel free to tighten and write and respond to Michael's wonderful presentation. So thank you again, Michael Kannisto. pain, 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 pain. Da me. Pain, pain, go away, come again another day. Little children want to play. Pain, pain, go away. Itami no itami ka keru betsu. No hi ni mata kimatsu. Chisana kodomo tachi wa asobitai. Itami no itami ka keru betsu. War. Bombs.
These are the stakes.
Empires.
We must either
Conflict.
love each other
Bullying.
or we must die.
Shooting. Depression. Suicide. Pain. Pain. Itami. Pain, pain, go away, come again another day. Little children want to play. Pain, pain, go away. Itami no itami ka keru betsu. No hi ni mata kimatsu. Chisana kodomo tachi wa asobitai. Itami no itami ka keru betsu. Sildo mine don hae is forever.
Jesu Domine, dona eis
And with that, my friends, I invite each one of you to reflect with us this theme that Michael posed to us. What is the last thought, the last thing that we will consider, think about before we die? Artists, please feel free to take the space or indicate to us that you would like to take the space. Rick Spisak.
Reflecting on that idea, I wrote this little piece called The Last Thought. What have I forgot? It meant a lot. That one trolley, the lovely Molly, one special grape Tootsie lolly. Was the stove left on? Did I leave unmowed the lawn? The afterglow with holly? The famed plane crash with Sully? Something silly or quite morose, long foretold by gypsies, or all of a sudden against a roadside post? Should I complain as my brain shuts down, or down the gone and head out of town? We gladly go, or accept the patient pausing as the fury of lights fade low. Who's to know? Dose with LSD like Huxley go, with the scintillating, sparkling, splashing rust of acid flow. Surely the normal process gives a quite distinguished, spectacular ending to our little lives, good enough for Grandpa and his 14 wives, whether quite cataclysmic or subtly solipsistic. Surely, Rodney, regardless of all we left behind, will leave the world quick on the double, timeless, and leave all those beloved senses now suddenly mindless, no longer carrying the spurious sponsored spurnings of the daring doings in all their yearnings. Regardless, no more of the dramatic poise returnings, churning show, one last glimpse to the eyes of the beloved, or the last earth tossed upon a shovel. Does the light go out quite quickly, or linger longer like an unclaimed chewing stick under the table stickly? Those who've come back have had their say, only journeying some small part of the way on that very specific, horrific, special day. Glorious, uproarious, some of them say, hearing history's ancient, long lost musical bells, or maybe scenes from what their favored yells, or the unshakable libel of silence. Thank you.
Michael says, I heard a fly buzz. And Michael, please feel free to chime in whenever you would like, since you are our shock artist. Rick, thank you for injecting your very sometimes absurdist approach towards our prompts, and sometimes the unusual way of interpreting an often taboo subject. Ian Mack, would you like to go next?
Well, as you might have expected, my first response was to write a sonnet. And then I wrote a variation of that sonnet And then the day after, I wrote a longer poem, which I'm going, the one I'm going to read. I'll put the 2 sonnets up on the Facebook page for you all to have a look at. But this one, I literally kind of just poured out of me. I wrote it in about 10-15 minutes, and apart from the odd slight change, this is basically as I wrote continuously. Just sat down in the morning and got my notebook open. It's called No Mea Culpas, as you might expect would be my bolshy attitude about the whole thing. No mea culpas, please, no raging against the night. After all, death is as natural an integral moment in this circular motion as night follows day and its corollary as day follows night, depending on which points in the cycle you find yourself traveling on. But nevertheless, being privileged to know at least that you existed, you were here one moment, and the next one or the next, you will be gone. And all the philosophers and all the mystics, the put-upons and religious freaks have no single word to say that will take this moment away. At most, alleviate the fears, that sense of doubt and terror that may accompany the blank stare of the unknown, the unknowable that peers out from behind the black hole that lurks on the other side of the heavy velvet curtain that we must inevitably stand before, to pull it aside and step through to that other, that mysterious and uncertain state. And the only certainty that I can ascertain is that no one yet has returned to tell the tale, to reveal the answer to that most unanswerable question. Is there life after death? Some joyous, painless existence? In short, do we ever come back to life again? And what should I think before that moment of awful truth as death waits to greet me? The same as ever, I suppose, as that sharp, keen blade hangs over one and all, from highmost to the lowest, could strike at any moment. And if that thought appalls or even offends you, I can only apologize, beg your forgiveness. It's all the same. I stand by what I said. Thank you.
Michael, any thoughts?
It's funny, I hadn't thought about this. I really like the way that people are sort of getting into the moment of those last moments. I can't remember who wrote The Parson's Son, but it was about the man freezing to death in the Yukon. And that kind of, I hadn't thought about that poem in years, as he literally just is, you know, grasping death, and the final thoughts that are sputtering through his head are so closely related. It's not sort of a philosophical version of death from a distance. It's in the moment, and that's what I love about what we're hearing this morning. It's a very tactile experience.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Ian. I've been teaching sonnets as well in British literature to my students, and one of the poems that we have to unpack is a Valediction by John Donne, and how some of the first lines talk about some people just think that death is um, so the final goodbye, but we are unpacking the intricacies of it and our ponderings, and the fact that we are thinking about today, Michael, how we're leaving messages for those beyond us, what may they find surprising about our mortal lives, and what surprises might await us. Maybe wonderful, maybe nothing, but even our nothingness might have some meaning to those who find us. So thank you, Ian.
You've got to give it to John Donne, though. He wrote some bloody good sonnets.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers.
Who would like to go next? All right. Since Ravi and Jen put their hands up first, you can long jump pass. No, ladies first. Jennifer.
Okay, thank you. The poem I'm reading today is called The Book of Life. The page is about to turn as if aided by a strong breeze. Some say it turns on its own. I believe there's an unseen hand that decides it is the last you'll read of me in this book, where I've been seen in pages past. As I'm about to cross the threshold, I'm certain it's purely by faith, through grace manifold, that I even stand a chance to have the gates of heaven let in someone like me to become its newest citizen. I have a second of thought left, no more second chances. Of that I'm afraid I'm bereft. So it's the book of my life. The thought I'm having right now is whether I've done enough, often enough to wield the plough. On things which God had gifted, what have I done or not done? Has anyone been uplifted by my actions or omissions, by words uttered or inked by me? I ask with my last and failing breath, what, if any, is my lasting legacy?
I love the imagery of wielding the plow. That just came out of nowhere, and it's just such a universal, like no matter what you do, like that represents work and toil and labors, and it's just such a universal image. I really like that.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Jennifer, I love how you wheel and weave your faith in most of the work that you do. It is just a seamless garment that you harmonize your words and your faith together. And I really appreciate that. Thank you. Ravi, I saved you from Long Bus, which is rock, paper, scissors in Singapore, but it's your turn.
This poem springs from the prompt, titled it Agonal. What's happened? I wish to buy enough copra when I earn my first rupee. I knew I wanted to fly far and wide before I knew what it was to pedal on a bicycle I never could own. I dreamt of owning the world before I wore my first pair of trousers. I knew I wished to kiss forever my love when young and before I knew love. I knew I wished harm to my enemy before he could bring harm to me. And now that I'm stuck in this deep crevasse with a sprained hip hanging by my eye sacks and none to call out for help, what do I care for all my wants and all my hatreds? I will myself not to loosen my grip on the handle, jam my knee and try to feebly kick in my crampons on the green ice in this cold, darkening waste. I know nothing but an intense desire to get out, work my way up, a rasping breath after a rasping breath. I know now heaven is where I can find a hint of dull green. Thank you.
And that damned clock keeps ticking away, Ravi. as if we needed reminding, you know, the sands of time are dribbling. Well, that was a lovely contemplation. You used your own experience, personal experience, to conjure up an image of what it might be like. And it reminds me of the film about the two climbers in the Andes, where one of them fell down a crevasse and literally had to, I think, amputate his own arm or leg in order to get back and crawl back to the base camp. And I think as well, I mean, if you're in that situation, I mean, as a climber, and particularly in the Himalayas, you literally are one step away from life and death. And so I think that must kind of bring that home to you in a very kind of graphic and direct way, that you are kind of almost confronting it every step, aren't you? There in your experience.
Thank you very much. Yeah, something similar happened to me though. It happened to my porter, in fact, who I had to rescue, bring him up onto the glacier, leave him there with my sleeping bag, and then walk down for 2 hours, and then get help, and then come back up and then carry him back to the camp.
It's I loved it, Robbie. It's funny, I hadn't thought about this in a while either. This is why I like coming here. I once did I participated in a community art intervention, and I went to a park in Manhattan and asked people to draw. I had little canvases and lots of markers and paints. I asked them to try to remember the earliest memory that they have, the earliest memory, and either write about it or draw it. And Robbie, when you were talking about, feeling the sprain, the breaths, so many of people's earliest memories were, I hadn't thought about that until you read it. It's like, I was terrified, I was lonely, I was cold, I was afraid. The first memories that people had, either good or bad, were so focused on a very raw emotion and their physical condition. So maybe that's how we start it. That's how we start off, and then we begin to think about more, I don't know, higher level thoughts, and then we end it again with the physicality of death, the physicality of birth, and the physicality of death.
Yeah, we are all mostly animals on a survival instinct. I guess the first thing that happens to us is survival of the self. And only then that one can think of the death flash, where the energy is passed down to the others, perhaps, or you transmogrify into something else, something beyond the present, beyond the physical. The most of the time, the corporeal is the reality. I guess we are all caught up with that.
It's funny because a lot of people had never, taking it from a thought and drawing a picture or writing it, a couple people had the experience where they finished drawing it or writing it and saying, wait a minute, that's impossible. That could never have happened. That could never have happened. I remember one woman saying, I was a baby and my family put me in an upside down umbrella and hung me from the gutter near the front door. And then she finished and said, that would never have, like, what was I thinking? That's not what happened. But clearly what she'd done was taken how she felt or her emotions as she was processing them or storing them in long-term memory, and created this, architecture around it. And it was so funny to see her have that revelation. Like, I believed this my whole life, but that's impossible. That could never have happened.
In fact, after I finished writing this, I started writing another longish poem, which is far more contemplative, which goes into, now I'm trying to do a discourse on the will and the soul, the free will, whether we have free will and what is absolute will. How does it all impact us at any given point of time? What are we as humanity today? These are larger questions that I'm trying to come to terms with in that.
Thank you, Ravi and Michael, for that dialogue. It was fascinating to hear you both bring in other experiences that enlightened, and wow, it's exciting and creative in its own way. Thank you. Lucian, you said that you had something that you would like to share in response.
Ooh, what is that? Oh, damn. I did not think that would be the way I would go. No, that is not the deceased favorite song, thank you. It's not wailing because you don't really like me. How many times did we hang out after we said we gotta catch up? Come on, really, stop wailing. All you really want to do is look good right now, so shut up. Ooh, what is that? It's soft. Ooh, it feels good on my skin. Damn, it makes me look good. Not like that stupid Undertaker that painted weird shit on my face. I look, oh, it's white. Makes me look taller. Oh, it's flattering. Yeah, I like this. What is that? Ooh, I got my kitchen knives. I like my kitchen knives. Oh, my phone. Ooh, is it charged? Ooh, it's ever charged. Always charged? Oh. And what's, nope, nope, don't look at that. Nope, nope. Who are all those people? They're strangely familiar. Hey, beer. I like beer. Cheers. And thank you.
I thought Clive said he couldn't make it today.
And there go I channeled Clive.
I wonder if they'd be able to hear you though, Lucia. Asking for a beer, and then it just sort of slips right through you.
My goodness. That's such a playful way to approach the subject of death.
You know, that's the whole point that I think MK did for me. I used to be so damn obsessed about death and how I wanted to die, what I wanted to do before I died. And I realized that's just a futile exercise. We can't orchestrate and plan that. So each time I went through those ministrations, it was a waste of time, it was depressing. But as I thought about how I wanted to live, as I thought about how what I wanted to be, how I want to be remembered and what I wanted to leave behind. Now that's a lot more interesting.
Michael, your thoughts? Did it trigger any of your acting tendencies? And
I felt very swept up in this. Like, I really like, I love the way we just jumped into it, and I was having my own dialogue about what am I going to say, right? And who will be there to hear me? And it's just one of billions and billions and billions of people who meet that inevitable transition. And I love the way people have been using the word threshold, crossing over. I guess we all instinctively, everyone has thought about their own death, and they've all sort of, whether they realize it or not, have kind of a framework for it. I do think there's, like I said, having had the opportunity to study different belief systems and mythologies about death, there are some common ones. And I guess we have that shared consciousness in a way that we always, somehow we all know that, you know, we'll greet our ancestors, we'll cross a river, we take a journey. It's just kind of a constant, and no one really knows why that is, right? I mean, civilizations that popped up with no contact from one another have a lot of common thoughts about how the end is going to occur. And I think that's so intriguing. It's such a human thing.
thank you, Lucian. That was fabulous. You took me out of the headspace, like, oh, the distance and contemplating death, to like, what the fuck is this? Oh, did I just swear on the show? Yeah.
I might have to edit that out.
All right. I'll let the editor know.
You need a white suit. I think you would look great in white. You need a white jacket, trousers, and a white shirt and a white tie. That would be cool.
Yeah.
I don't know
And
anyone who makes
I'm
jackets
afraid
in the
there's a
States.
musical accompaniment to go with it as well. A song and dance man. That'd be this year.
Michael, next time we go to New York, we might have to take measurements of Lucian.
That would be a near-death experience.
Michael, where's your hand? Where's your other hand?
Oh my goodness.
Inseam, I'll just estimate it.
Oh
I
my
can hold my breath.
yeah. Where's Diane Murray Ward when I need her? You know, we should all meet at, what's that name of that restaurant, that Korean restaurant? Right along, because I'm really hungry right now. And I'm ready to be in New York to eat some Korean food. Yes. And with Diane Murray Ward, Diane, you're not here today, but you know what? I see you wherever you are. All right. Who would like to go next? Justin, then Dr. Molly.
Hello. Yeah, the Queen of England, the impersonation was really funny. So it reminded me of like when the Egyptians mummified people. They used to use the hook to dig out the organs from the nose and like incisions, and like they would throw away the brain and preserve the heart. So that's like precisely what Lucian did. The heart of it. In my last breath. Emily Chan, like her Dickinson namesake, wrote about death. She waxed transcendent to her last breath. She foresaw the time gurgle on, and sprightly gentlemen laid her to rest with pompons. Rich Larkin, like Julian Matthews, signed life checks, with splendid writing about ordinary objects. When he mauled a hedgehog with a bow in tall grass, he mourned its unobtrusive end, extorting kindness to the last. Tracy K. Smith worked on the Hubble telescope, and she wrote about him like one touch man against many, holding out hope. A multitude of caravans chasing him like red ants down the pans. His memories of him raising his hand, weightless in space in a trance. Ravi thought death doth not come for all. Some do not die regardless of how loud death's call. Why do you say it does? His analytical mind questions, timely fishing for life-affirming suggestions. For you, Justin, connecting make life worth living. I enjoy the process of striving, and in my last breath, holding dear memories and harrowing experiences close, watching my life shine through, with repose free from morals. Thank you. So they say your life actually before your eyes like a slight show when you die. So yeah. Thank you.
Justin, thanks for immortalizing me in your poem.
I'm just
very
glad
welcome,
that
Ravi.
That's
I'm
one
just
way
glad
to
that
stay Ravi, yeah.
Ian, can you please say that again? I talked over you.
Oh, sorry, no, I said that's one way to stay alive in some way.
I was going to
Sorry.
say I'm glad that he didn't immortalize Ravi in a canoptic jar and through the nose.
Immortalized as a piece of snot coming out of it. Sorry.
Michael, any thoughts?
I really like this. So now we went from kind of a universal set of experiences to a hyper customized version, what each person's farewell will be about. And I'm trying to remember another movie. You mentioned Departures. There's another movie where you get to pick your final farewell before you move on to the afterlife. Basically, they create like a movie of your most memorable, the most important thing that happened to you in your life. It's like you go to a film set and they figure out what's really important to you. They kind of film a final scene. The group of people who are about to pass on watch each other's movies, and then they move on to the next life. I'll look it up here and put it in the chat. Really unusual film, but very, very clever. Again, so super customized, a bespoke end of life experience. I loved it. I liked all the detail. Those were fun. That was fun to listen to. Thank you.
Michael, by the way, it reminds me, what you say reminds me of a movie called Red Tent, where Sean Connery has guest appeared in it. It's about Fitzgerald's North Pole expedition. The scene begins with Sean Connery going to the grave of all those dead sailors. And then one by one, they get up to tell their story. It's an amazing movie.
Oh, wow. There was a Twilight Zone with Donald Pleasance, who is feeling depressed in middle age, and he's a teacher, and the ghosts of all his students come back and tell them why being in his class was so important to him one by one. It's you don't see it very often, but it's a really remarkable episode of the Twilight Zone.
Logan's Run has a final death scene for people where they get a chance to see a movie of themselves. Perhaps that's the one you're thinking of.
This is why I love this group. We are no longer a bunch of writers or poets. We are artists that bring in so many different disciplines and genres, and we are enlightening one another on, you gotta check this out, you gotta check this out. Oh, that's so cool. You guys are cool. Thank you for the conversations. I'm loving it. Dr. Molly.
Hi, friends. I was listening intently to all these different threads of conversation, dwelling on such a subtle, serious theme, death experience, what happens after death. And as Michael put it in his own, designing of costumes in a special way. Those costumes cover up certain vital parts of the body, like the legs, the toes. But still, looking at the costume, we know that there powerfully exist the presence within the absence. Or we would say, the absence impregnated with the presence. When I think of death also, I feel, though there is silence, there is so much of hushed eloquence in it. It is still a mystery. What happens when our inner kernel of being is escaping from the cage of the body? Where does it go? It's still a puzzle. But still we hope. There is a kind of cosmic energy they live in, they dwell in. They pass through us, they see us. At least I wish to think so. Maybe to console myself. So here goes my poem, my last thought at deathbed. Don't confine me in the cocoons of the ventilator in ICU. I need the freedom to make a cozy exit to the world hitherto unknown. Now my heart beats, turns slow, as if demanding a reprieve. Yes, they slogged for long in vicissitudes of angst, thrill, pulsating waves of joy, sorrow, expectation, traversing altitudes and depths. Now my legs too need a permanent rest. Coldness, numbness inches up over me from my toes and limbs before they sweep over my conscious self. Just one thought, a wish. Let me pass off peacefully, floating on the soft, smooth, transcending music of Yanni, glimpsing my dears standing near, smiling, reassuring, all is fine. Even the little ones wondering how their grandma can thus lie only with smiles and no jolty talk. They may prod me naughtily. Hey, grandma, our dog is out waiting for us to play. Yes, let my world expand around my deathbed, my yard, my garden, the giant granny mango tree that always defied time with recurrent, unfailing blooms. And of course, let it bloom, blossom timeless. My world of birds swaying over creative mindscapes, let it bloom. The song that Mina sang as she flew over the hills to disappear. Her voice resonating in the hills and valleys. Let my last breath, as it merges with the cosmic, waft over all with a fragrant, cool nip in the vagrant whisper of the winds. Thank you, dears. Thank you so much. My other name is Maina. You know, that's my pen name when I write in my mother tongue, Malayalam. Molly is the official name. The real name, they call me Maina. Maina the bird.
So fitting for you, Molly. So I need to write something about Molly Mina.
Thank you, dears. Great being with you. Great experience. Lucian was throwing the seriousness into relief by his very, lively way of looking at it. Thank you, Lucian.
Molly, I found your words. Strangely, you are talking about death, but there was a very romantic, love-making thread to it. It felt like it was so natural.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, that it felt so loving. What a loving environment that you painted for us.
I don't think you actually said it, but the impression I came away with is this view, the view of death that you created so colorfully, is that it's a permeable barrier, right? As opposed to like, well, that's it, time of death, that's it. Who knows what happened to her? Who knows where she went? We'll never know again. You created this vision of sort of flying over the top of it and being able to, if not interact directly, observe the living and potentially have them observe you. The permeability of the boundary is really gorgeous. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to share in this conversation before I go?
I might, Cameron, thanks. And firstly, it's great to be back and apologies. It's Tuesday's just become a direct clash day for me, but I got off early, so I'm happy to be back. I think it would be disrespectful of me because I missed Mike's opening, so I'll watch it later and come up with something async, but just a few random thoughts, really random thoughts, and hopefully I'll stay within the 4-minute. It would be a tragedy if I got knocked out by LSD after returning after so long. Okay, very quickly. I have actually had a crucible moment. I haven't shared it with anyone on this group, I think. So I nearly drowned when I was 6 years old, and I was that close. So I was lucky. I got the full Monty CPR and all. So I don't know whether you want to call it near death or not. And we don't have enough time on this call for me to give you the graphic detail, but I've been there. Okay, so yeah, we can talk about it some other time. Other random thoughts. I grew up with a lot of influences. A lot of those were around Buddhism. And starting at the age of 19, I made a regular practice of reading 2 books. One was very heavy. I didn't get most, I still don't, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. But Sogyal Rinpoche's Tibetan Book of the Dead and Living is a little bit more readable. And even if you ended up reading just chapter 1, which describes the contrast between a novice, both of them are monks, but a novice monk suddenly all of his training vanishes and he's panicked as anyone else, versus the true master who is calm. And in essence, what the first chapter says is one's entire life is about preparing for that moment. And I was struck by that. I've kind of thought about that a lot. I'm going to just read out something which I'm not even sure it links to the theme, but it's a cop-out. Okay, so forgive me. I call it the one line, and it's something I've shared with a few of you, and with apologies to JRR, the one line. The one line that says it all, the one line that blinds you, the one line you must recall when the darkness finds you, the one line you never wrote, the one line you've lost, the one line you'll never quote, the line you cruelly tossed. So, that's it. Thank you. I'll write something better. Just didn't have time, so apologies. You're on mute.
So, the one line that you did not speak or think or bring forth before you die.
Well, there are some great one-liners, Kelman. The best one was Lucky Luciano, who said, just make sure they make a movie about me. I like that one.
Michael?
It's super powerful, right? Because it is, you get one chance, and
I blew it. Yeah.
No. I mean, like, what? Yeah. I mean, what will you regret, right? What will you think about? What will be the last thought? We can't control it, and it will probably be quite unexpected.
Unless you're a lucky person, like in the Hindu epic, the Mahabharata, there's one of the central characters called Bhishma, and those who've not read it, or I'm happy to write something specially, he's given a boon for, having taken a whole set of terrible vows. He's given a boon that he can choose the moment of his going. And oddly enough, although he's defeated in battle, he waits for the sun to change direction and head northward, because that's auspicious. So he actually imparts a lot of wisdom and knowledge from the time he fell in battle to the moment of his actual going. So another story from another culture.
Oh, it sounds so epic. I love it.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Thank you so much for this conversation as well, that brought up some even more things for us to research and to ponder upon. As I was thinking about that one line, how grateful I am that we have between the lines, because this is a manifestation of my desire when I was really, really ill in 2021, that I didn't want to live a life of regret anymore. And so Lucian and I started BTL as one of the manifestations of why I do not want to regret and do something that was really important to me. So thank you, Lucian, and thank you for each one of you for being a part of this very, very special community to me. And some of you are, as Molly would say, you dears. Um, I'm so proud to share all of you with the world because of the ethos and the heart that remains and hopefully will remain for as long as there's an internet. And welcome to Eric Vallis. He is in the house, and Eric is going to be our Sayang artist next week. And we'll also share a little bit more about who he is. His theme that he has posed for us is about the phoenix. So we will be thinking about rising and comebacks. And just like what Neil said about, the one line that we never said, the regret. And hopefully, while we have breath, we have an opportunity to not live life in regret. Eric, did you prepare anything for the theme?
Yeah, but I actually have a poem about a former colleague's funeral. It's from an actual encounter with people talking about a deceased person. This is after Ibrahim's funeral. Before quivering images and wailing voices of a Tamil talent TV show, his wife Isa lays out a banquet and wipes her eyes dry with henna-adorned, flaking hands. Chinese colleagues and his Muslim kin gather over chicken biryani and naan in the living room of his Gimmo flat. Condolences and an envelope are passed as relatives cluck stories about the man. Colleagues talk about the Little India riot. Children shriek as they play "We" in a bedroom, like a choir of cockatoos at dawn. While Ibrahim sleeps in the dark earth, Chinese colleagues and his Muslim kin pass stories, chicken biryani, and naan. They come and go in his Gimmo flat. In that narrow living room, cramped like a funeral parlor, lamplight shines on sterling silver clinking against IKEA ornamental plates. We console each other with every mouthful, reaffirm that the deceased was a good man. Chinese colleagues and his Muslim kin grieve over chicken biryani and naan that he can no longer enjoy, that he can no longer savor in his Gimmo flat.
Eric, would you read your refrain again?
Okay, there's something like a motif, right? It's just, Chinese colleagues and his Muslim kin grieve over chicken biryani and naan. So in watershed moments, it seems that, so we have people with our closest kin, our friends, so we gather and we share a meal and we have fellowship, just like what we're having tonight here.
Eric, that is profoundly, it's almost sacramental. Chicken biryani and naan, the Last Supper in memory. So whenever we eat the chicken biryani and naan, we would think of the deceased.
Yeah.
That is so beautiful.
Thank you.
Communion.
It seems many cultures have a starch and a protein, right? A way of getting protein and a way of getting starch. You don't have charcuterie at a funeral. You have a starch and a protein. You have a real life-sustaining meal, right? I never thought about that before. And you don't do finger foods, right? It's a meal. You have fellowship and community building at a meal. Very interesting. I never thought about that. I love the imagery. Someone had said it, you transported us all there. We all could smell it. Getting hungry.
I know of a community in the Kodagu Hills in India, in Karnataka, where the Kodavas traditionally offer drink and food at the funeral for all visitors.
My heart is full. Michael, this show could not have happened without you. Your prompt, your presentation, your kind affirmation of words. What would you like to say to this community?
Well, first of all, thank you. I had such a fun time. And I guess it's the advice I'd give myself, but the thought I'll leave you with is the thought I'll leave myself with, which is the one that I came out of during my preparation, which is the poem, the poetry that we all create. We read it to each other, we post it, we publish it, but we really don't know who's going to end up reading it and when and where and what it will mean to them. It's a very profound bit of work that this group does. So I'll ask you to take a moment and acknowledge the importance of that. Thank you. Thank you.
Lucian, anything you would like to say as my co-host?
Stick a fork in it.
That's a motto for life. Stick a fork in it.
Death, radioactive decay, decomposition, dressed in finery, entrails dissectable, a requiem, a lullaby, enter into a shroud, a wedding gown, rebirth, white satin, tulle, or silk, sex, making love, birth, our children, for generations to come, remember us. Future generations, communication with the beyond is there, an afterlife. Pia Jesu Domine, dona eis requiem, dona eis requiem. Come just as you are. Hear the Spirit call. Come just as you are. Come with me. Come and see. Come and live forevermore. Friends, if we are able, let us mate and meet next week between the lines.
Thank you very much.